Welcome to Alternative Investments Chat,
where we demystify the world of alternative investments and financing for entrepreneurs and investors alike.
With these discussions, we hope you're more empowered to unlock opportunities in your business or portfolio. I'm Erin.
And I'm Erica. Let's get started.
Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about when investments go wrong. Investments can go wrong for all sorts of different reasons. Today, we're going to talk about some of the more interesting or not fun for the people who lose the money, but fun for us to talk about maybe.
Yes.
Sometimes they can go wrong for reasons that are out of anyone's control. And also sometimes they can go wrong because of bad actors or scammers. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But particularly in this episode, we'll be talking about alternative investments that fail due to poor management, poor market conditions, or unrealistic expectations.
That's right. And as everyone probably knows by now, this is going to be one of my favorite episodes because we get to talk about the risks and kind of evaluating those before investing in alternative assets and why it's so important.
Yeah,
so hopefully after hearing some of these horror stories, if you will, or real life cases, you walk away with a lesson learned. You might learn that there are bad people in this world and they're trying to take your money.
Yeah.
We're going to show you how to identify them.
Yeah, hopefully at least a couple of ways, and also maybe learn where some people have failed with their investments due to other things,
right?
And maybe what to look for with those. So we could start with real estate.
Let's do it.
Lots of things that can go wrong in real estate. I'm sure that you can think about a building or a project in your area that has been stagnant, right? I can think about maybe 10 off the top of my head in the Phoenix area that I drive by every day, and they're just sitting there. And you wonder, what happened? Like, what's going on with this? Why isn't this project finished? It's been like 10 years. What's going on, right?
Yeah. You see the sign out there still says for lease, for lease, for lease.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is a great area. What's going on? Why isn't this
what's
being
going
occupied?
on? Or even projects that are in construction and have been in construction for 10 years and have not ever finished. So there's lots of different ways that can happen. But some properties sit vacant for years due to a poor location or market downturns, as you might imagine. Sometimes investors may overestimate the actual rental demand, and then they're left with an overflow of supply that they can't get rid of, right? You have low occupancy rates and negative cash flow because you're still paying to keep that building up, but you don't have tenants. So you're basically wasting money. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was Detroit's overbuilt housing market.
Oh no, here we go.
Yeah, oh no. So in the early 2000s, investors rushed to buy cheap properties, expecting appreciation in those areas, but economic decline left thousands of those homes abandoned. Detroit was once a booming manufacturing city. You know, there were cars coming out of there, lots of people that were moving for jobs with their families. At one point, very, very popular place to live. Yeah. But that isn't exactly the case any longer. So this is pretty interesting. In 2023, there were some properties that were houses listed in Detroit for only $1.
Yeah, I heard about those. So what's the catch?
Yeah,
there?
what's the catch?
Why are people like going in and scooping all them up?
Right. So they've actually been sitting there. No one is buying them. And you might think like, oh, that sounds pretty appealing, especially if you live somewhere with housing prices that are actually skyrocketing. Yeah. Buying a home for $1 sounds pretty good, right?
Exactly.
But actually, some of the reasons why people aren't jumping on these properties, number one, a lot of them are actually really, really damaged. We're talking about exposed piping. We're talking about squatters living there who have damaged the property. We're talking about like foundational damage. So basically, if you were to buy this property, you're going to have to like gut it, redo it, sometimes completely tear it down and rebuild it.
Got it.
Number two, they're located in what are considered less desirable neighborhoods as well. And plus, the city's property taxes are actually pretty high. Yes. So all in all, you're going to be paying a lot more money for this property. So the like pros and cons, like the bottom line does not even out and make it worth it.
So basically what you're telling me is just buy the new house.
Yeah, apparently, right?
But even though $1 sounds delightful, it's like It's not worth it.
Yeah. But what that does mean is that all of these investors that did invest in these properties, and even the owners of those properties, right? Sometimes just normal people, have lost money.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it happens kind of a lot. In fact, now we're gonna kind of pivot and talk about the Evergrande projects in China. So initially, this was a super lucrative project. It was awesome, making money hand over fist, right? So the founder used debt. We know a lot about that.
Yeah,
we've talked about it a lot on our podcast here to finance the land purchases, and they sold homes before they were built. This is extremely common. In fact, I remember when the Four Seasons was coming in actually to Arizona, they were pre-selling the houses and the condos that they build alongside the really high-end resorts like here in the area. So they were pre-selling those. I still don't even know if they're actually built. Funny story, because this was a long time ago. So the debt began to, get way out of control, and the company started to roll out some really creative solutions to raise more money. Yeah. So they started asking their employees to invest in the company, sometimes as much as half of their salary.
That's not good.
Listen, I'm already poor. I can't give you half of my salary. Like, can you imagine? You're like, here's for my... Not only do I work hard for you, then now and you give me a salary, then I give half of it back to you. I'm going to go ahead and say, no, thank you. And in the end, the debt was so much, there was so much debt to handle, and the property values plummeted.
Yeah.
And confidence was lost in the project and in the management. Can you imagine? Like, you're like, dude, you took all my money. What the heck, dude?
Right.
And so in 2021, the company's debt reached $300 billion.
That's crazy.
Which, of course, they can't pay.
Right.
So, meaning that the investors lost our money. So, what are the takeaways here?
Yeah, what are the takeaways? Research local markets and economic trends before investing in real estate. This seems like a duh, but just be aware of that. And avoid speculative markets that rely on high appreciation instead of a steady income. Yeah. Obviously, if you are if you're an investor who is interested in more high risk investments, you might still invest in a market that is speculative because that's your profile. That's what you want to do.
You're okay with it.
You're okay with it. But if you are somebody who wants to be a little bit more conservative with your investments, it might be best to invest in a place that already has some income generated, has been proven to be doing well, and then get on that as opposed to a brand new market that you know nothing about.
Yeah.
So let's dive into an example of a high-risk commodity investment that didn't work out.
Okay.
Some alternative investments boom due to global demand, but crash very quickly due to oversupply. And this is exactly what happened with rare earth metals in the 2010s.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought up China, because rare earth metals boom and bust occurred because of a trade dispute between China and Japan, actually.
Got it.
Basically, a diplomatic standoff occurred between both of the countries. And this led to an unofficial trade ban on rare earth metals to Japan, so exporting from China to Japan. And this sent shockwaves through supply chain. You may not know, but China is actually one of the world's top producers of rare earth metals. And these are actually used to power all sorts of technology like batteries. And that's just one of the many examples. But in Japan, you may know, is known for exporting high quality automobiles, electronic equipment, including like circuits and chips and stuff, machinery and parts for motor vehicles. So all of these things require the rare earth metals from China.
Yeah.
Right.
So if they can't get those, what are they going to do?
What are they going to do? Right. So because of that, rare earth metal prices skyrocketed like crazy. People started to see this happen, and investors started to invest. They're like, this is a great opportunity. It's growing like crazy. I can make a ton of money. China, in order to keep up with that demand, started producing way more. And actually the overproduction of this caused for an oversupply. And essentially the trade restrictions disintegrated between Japan and China, which eventually, that's called a bust, right? Because now we have an oversupply and the values on that supply fall dramatically.
Yeah.
So basically a lot of those people lost money because they invested when something was really high and then it was really low. And now what are you going to do? You just lost your money, unfortunately.
That stinks and extremely interesting. And honestly, it may come as no surprise that investors, obviously, they chase these trends. We're going to talk about this later on in a different episode as well when we talk about some of the actual scams, but like you have to be very wary of that.
Totally.
Sometimes it pays off and other times it can leave an investor with depreciating assets once the demand dropped, just like you said. Like they're like, yeah, this is going great. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, and it's not.
Right.
And one of those examples that I wanted to chat about is completely blast from the past.
Totally.
I remember these. I owned some of these, and I'm talking about Beanie Babies.
Beanie Babies.
Beanie Babies. So if you were around in the 90s, you know that Beanie Babies were like all the rage. People collected them. They camped out for limited edition ones. They even crafted specialty storage solutions to keep these plush animals in pristine condition in hopes to resell them one day. I remember they used to sell little plastic covers for the tags because you weren't supposed to take the tags off. And then one of my favorite photos of Beanie Babies was it's a couple getting divorced and they're in the courtroom and they're on the ground dividing up the Beanie Babies.
Iconic.
That like, because those were their assets.
Yep.
So as we all know, Beanie Babies fell off the shelf.
Yeah.
They disappeared. No one really knows why, but maybe because everyone figured that these little itty bitty things were just collecting dust and taking up room in their house.
Yeah.
I know I had a closet full of them and I was like, what am I supposed to do with these little things? Because you're not allowed to play with them.
Right.
You're not allowed to
or you're not
touch them.
supposed to, right? I even remember that as a kid. It was like, these might be worth a lot of money one day.
Yeah. So I'm like, what are they doing? Just sitting on your shelf staring at you, all creepy. So, and then the secondary resale market finally settled. So nobody wanted them. You could buy them for like, 50 cents or whatever. And these collectors were left with, like I said, a ton of Beanie Babies that were essentially worthless.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what did we learn here? Again, don't buy Beanie Babies. No, I'm just kidding. Avoid speculative markets that rely on hype. Again, if everyone's like, this is awesome, it's going to be worth so much, do a little bit of research. It might not be. And alternative assets should be a part of a diversified investment strategy, not your only vehicle.
Totally.
So those people getting divorced, not only did they spend a lot of money on probably their lawyers and a lot of time divvying up those Beanie Babies.
No kidding.
But they, at the end of the day, they weren't worth anything.
Right. I know. That's pretty funny.
You probably lost money because you had to spend to buy the trash bags to throw them away.
Yeah. Don't put all your Beanie Babies in one basket.
There we go.
So now let's jump over into tech startups and talk about a couple of things that didn't work out there. Some startups actually receive a ton of funding and in the end don't deliver on their promises. There could be a lot of different reasons why that happens. This is a very interesting example of this. In 2016, a company called Juicero was launched. And
worst name ever. Sorry, whoever invented this.
They promised to provide an easy, no mess solution to juicing at home. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to juice at home, but it is a pain in the butt.
Yes.
So, they had I watched a few of their commercials in our research, and I was bought in. I get it. Like, when you want to go to juice something, you have to source all the produce, you have to clean all the produce, you have to peel all the produce, then you have to juice it, then you have to clean the juicer, which is a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
So I get it. They have like an admirable goal to try to solve. Okay. So basically, Juicero was a machine that used disposable packets that you would buy from them. So you'd buy the machine and you'd buy the packages. And Juicero would squish the packet and create cold pressed juice was the idea. And it's supposed to be done with immense pressure. They advertised, or the actual founder was quoted saying it was the force of 2 Teslas that was in this little machine. Oh, Lord.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Juicero was actually launched with a $700 price tag, which is ridiculous. Eventually it came down to $400, but that's still like a lot of money.
I'm not spending that on a kitchen gadget that We all know how we get.
Sure.
I'm going to use it for a week. Okay, wait, let's be nice. I'll use it for a month and then I'm over it.
Sure. And, but it is also not that crazy if you think about like a KitchenAid stand mixer, which can be used for a lot more different things. But like that is like a $400, $500, depending on the model that you get, sometimes even more. So, it's kind of falling into that like luxury appliance situation.
Yeah, but the KitchenAid mixer has all the attachments, so you can use it more often.
You have to buy the attachments, but yes. So the downfall of Juicero, it's not funny, but it kind of is. It's not funny for the people who lost their money, but was actually caused by a video that was published by Bloomberg in 2019. And the title of the video was, "Do you need a $400 juicer?" And all it does is shows how the Juicero works. You press the button and it squeezes. And then it shows a person squeezing the package with their hands. And guess what? You get the same result. You get the same result. You don't need the machine. Yeah, whoa. So unfortunately, that didn't work out very well for Juicero. Now customers are super angry and demanded their money back, and Juicero's profits plummeted and they eventually went out of business. So that's a big bummer.
That stinks. Well, okay. So again, what do we learn here? Learn about the startups that you're investing in.
Yeah.
Ask the questions and be skeptical. Really go in and look at the product and see if it's actually worth it. And you want to be cautious of products that claim to be revolutionary.
Yeah.
Does this product actually solve a problem or just claim to?
Right.
Most of them, they just claim to, unfortunately. But be wary of disruptive startups without clear profitability paths too. So you want to make sure that you're, again, research, due diligence, my favorite words.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now let's talk about my favorite scams and fraudulent investment schemes, which we are going to do a whole episode on here coming up.
Yep.
So stay tuned. We're going to dive into some of those. We know that scammers often exploit investors' greed by offering high returns with little transparency.
Right.
Example of this is the London Capital and Finance, the LCF investment fraud. Okay. So LCF sold mini bonds with high interest rates. They misled over 11,600 investors, mainly the elderly, unfortunately, resulting in about $301 million in losses when it collapsed in 2019.
Rough.
So again, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in an episode coming up. About Ponzi schemes, but a judge actually ruled that this operation, that what LCF was doing was a Ponzi scheme. And in the judge's opinion, that the executives at LCF wanted to take as much money as they could and were recklessly indifferent to their beholders.
Rough.
Really bad. So just a basic breakdown of what a Ponzi scheme is, just in case you've never don't really know what it means. I'm sure we've all heard the term, but a Ponzi scheme is basically an investment that pays existing investors with new funds collected with new investors.
Right.
So robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
You take from one and you give to the other. And it's a cycle that makes it look like everyone's getting what they need, except for you have to keep getting more people in.
Exactly.
So these executives at LCF used investor money to provide for their luxury lifestyle.
Of course.
Think private memberships at country clubs, jewelry, car, vacation homes, Yeah, they were totally just using this money to profit themselves and live luxuriously.
Yeah, didn't care too much about their investors.
No, not at all.
It's really sad.
No, it is.
Yeah, so it's a really bad loss for those investors for sure. Unfortunately, scammers sometimes target specific groups of people or communities, and this is called affinity fraud. So an example of this is the LDS Church Ponzi scheme. Between 2017 and 2022, scammers Michael Beasley, Jeffrey Judd, and a few others were specifically targeting members of the LDS Church in their Ponzi scheme, which stole $500 million from members.
Can you imagine going to church and looking across the pew and being like, I know what you did, sir.
Right. I know.
You and Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the problem, right? Is that religious groups are especially at risk for affinity fraud. Sometimes the red flags are ignored because you inherently trust that person.
Yeah.
You go to church every Sunday or whenever you go to church and you're a part of the same group, you feel you have the same values, same morals. So there's like that inherent sort of trust. Or you know a bunch of people in your community that are investing in it. So you feel like it's kind of like everyone's jumping off the bridge you joined too. But, you feel comfortable because you're like, oh, well, all these people that I trust and love are doing this thing. So it must be okay for me to do it as well. So it's pretty sad that happened. Beasley actually promised investors that they could earn returns of up to 50% annually, quote, risk-free, which if anybody ever tells you that about investing, you need to run the other way.
Turn around, run.
Exactly.
Slap him in the face and run away.
Yeah.
That's
do that.
Rude. You and Jesus are slapping you in the face for doing this.
Now we're promoting violence on the podcast.
I steal, I hit people.
Yeah.
Not scared. Come at me.
All right. Okay. So Beasley promised that to investors. And he said that the way that they could do that was by lending money to slip and fall plaintiffs who settled lawsuits and were awaiting their payments. There was, in fact, no loans that were made, period, to the groups of people that he said they were going to be made to. Yeah. And instead, they used the money to pay off, older investors, or they mostly just kept the money for themselves. Yeah. So
it always goes.
What did we learn?
It's such a betrayal of trust there,
Yes.
and it stinks. And if you're one of those investors, it might be scaring. We don't want to scare you away from investing in anything, but like this stuff is real, and we want to make sure you understand that. But we've definitely learned a couple of things here, and that's if an investment is too good to be true, slap them in the face and run away. No, and then you want to make sure you conduct due diligence on the investment and the people managing it.
Right. Who is this Michael Beasley guy?
I don't know.
Let's look into it.
They're going to be able to find him because he's going to have a red mark across his face from me. Because I saw it coming.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't inherently trust people, right? Especially when you're giving them money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do we know? Sometimes investments don't go as planned.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately. And sometimes they don't go as planned in a very, very big way, a very, very devastating way. Sometimes they don't go as planned in a positive way. Sometimes they don't go as planned in a middle way. But that's the thing with investments. There's no guarantees, and you don't have a crystal ball. We can't see into the future.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just along for the ride. There is always inherent risk to investing, period. And bad investments can actually drain your wealth faster than good ones can build it. Sometimes slow and steady wins the race, right?
Always.
So be wary, do your research, and don't trust people up front. You should do some digging.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So smart investing is about knowing the risks. And if you don't fully understand an investment, probably shouldn't be in it.
Yeah.
Just
good call.
Just, you know what? I don't know enough. I'm just going to politely bow out. Other than that, that's it for today's episode. We hope that we have
enlightened you.
Yeah, with some uncertain, these
some
really
unfortunate
circumstances.
Stories. Yeah.
It really stinks, but I hope that you might have learned from it. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more insight on our next episode.
And don't forget to subscribe to continue the Alternative Investments chat.
See you next time.
Content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional, financial, or investment advice. This podcast should not be construed as an offer to sell or a solicitation of any offer to buy any securities. We strongly recommend that you seek advice from a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.